Hello, fam.
Good to see y'all again.
And we're live on YouTube.
Hey.
All right. So we're actually live on Instagram and live on YouTube for anybody who wants to catch the replay for today. So this is Authentic Marriages Live and in the Flesh. I am Cara Kidu.
And I'm Jared Kidu.
And we are the co-founders of Authentic Marriages. And for those of you who are new to the tribe, who have not met us before, I am a licensed clinical social worker and I specialize in couples therapy and trauma and individuals with relationship issues.
And I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, so I work with kids as well as adults with psychiatric issues.
Yes. So together we combine our professional skill set in the mental health field along with our spiritual Christian foundation. And we married the two together and created Authentic Marriages to be a community and a place for people who are seeking and striving to have emotionally and spiritually healthy marriages.
Exactly, yeah.
So our goal in general is to help couples not just have a good marriage, but to really have a thriving and an healthy marriage where they feel like this relationship is a gift and this
Right.
relationship is a blessing. And I think that, one of the things that we had been talking about is the divorce rate. Right. And the divorce rate is pretty high. And it's almost like 40% of marriages end in divorce, right? That's first time marriages.
First time marriage.
It's higher.
Divorce.
It's actually higher for
Succeeding marriages after. Like, so you've been
it
married
gets worse and
two or
worse
three
and worse.
times, exactly. It gets more and more likely to get divorced.
Yes.
So it's something that happens to a lot of people. And the vast majority of people, when you get married, it's not like you're saying, I think we're going to end up divorced on the day that you said.
Says no one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Says no one. So the thing is that most people, when they're engaged and about to be married or just married, are really, really in love. They are like, as a young newlywed couple, you are in love. You are rosy eyed. Like, it's almost unimaginable that you could think that your relationship would ever grow apart.
Right.
Yet, more than half, if not the majority of couples, find themselves in relationships that have grown apart,
Right.
that have become emotionally disconnected. And it's all, and I say that to say, like, it's unimaginable in the beginning.
Right.
Like, in the beginning, when you're just married, you see all those beautiful wedding pictures. You see people just kind of like living this amazing life on Instagram or Facebook. And you think to yourself, wow, I want that. And when you get there and you've gotten it, you eventually get to a place where you're like, wait a minute, what happened here? Like what happened to our story? What happened to this, picture perfect, relationship that I imagined that we would have? And what ends up happening is that a lot of couples grow apart for many, many, many reasons.
Right. Exactly. I know the thing is that even some people will say, well, that's not us, because, like, even if you will say, hey, guess what? I know that things can get difficult. I know things can get tough. We've had tough times before we got, married. And so I know things can get difficult and, we're going to be okay, But the issue is that you don't understand, for a lot of people, they don't understand that the depths of which things can go wrong. And a level of hurt, like there are levels to this stuff. There's levels to the pain that people experience when their marriages aren't working the way they thought that they would. And it's hard to imagine it. If you haven't experienced it before, it's hard to really imagine how wrong things can go and how quickly that can happen without there being any crisis event where there's not any super bad thing that's happened. Like, well, I found out that my husband was cheating with like 10 different people. Like, no, nothing like that. Like, regular stuff in life that happens to pretty much everybody can put you in a state where your marriage feels really cold and feels really empty and you feel unfulfilled and hurt a lot.
And as I say, like, most people when they get married never imagine that this is going to be their story. They never imagine that their marriage will turn into this. And so I just want to encourage anybody who is listening, who might be engaged, who might be dating, who might be a newlywed, to consider that if it could happen to you, it could happen to me.
Right.
Like to just have that posture of there is nothing, like we tend to look and think, oh, those are those people, right? Whoever those people are.
Right.
And we tend to have this posture of like, well, that can't happen to me because I'm different,
right,
and I know better and I'm better than all those people, right? And I want us to kind of consider that if it could happen to you, it could happen to anybody, including you. If it could happen to me, if it could happen to your friends, your neighbors, it doesn't matter. It can happen to you.
Exactly.
And the thing that we have to be mindful of, especially if you're a Christian, is that the devil is going to attack your marriage. He wants to attack your marriage. He wants your marriage to fail.
Right.
That is his goal. Because if your marriage succeeds, and if you have been blessed to have a spiritually, emotionally healthy relationship,
right,
then the only thing good, what is going to come out of that is that you're going to bless other people.
Right.
And you're going to build a kingdom. And your marriage is going to be used for God's glory and God's honor. And why would the devil want that?
Exactly.
So I think it's important to remember, especially for those of you who are Christians, that the devil isn't going to jump over you
right,
and skip to the person next to you to be like, I'm going to pick on that person and not pick on you. And so that's the thing with marriages. What I have found as a couples therapist is that a lot of the couples who are in couples therapy with me, whatever they're presenting concern is that they come to couples therapy for, because it's often masked in different things, like we can't talk, we're always fighting, we argue over parenting, we argue over the kids, we argue over finances. Those are the masks. Those are really like not the real issues 99.9% of the times. A lot of times what happens in a lot of relationships is lack of connection.
Yeah, that's the core issue.
And the lack of connection then creates the things that people come to therapy for.
Exactly. And the thing about getting disconnected is that, it's a very easy process, because it's one of those things where, it's like if you have two ships that are in the ocean, or just think about two boats in a lake, right, that are beside each other. If they're not anchored, then what ends up happening that they slowly start to drift apart. So if you're in a big lake or in the ocean, and then you get separated, you literally can't get back any closer, because you're so far away from each other. But it happened very, very slowly. And that's what happens in marriages for a lot of people, is things happen very slowly, imperceptibly. You can't even tell it's happening a lot of the times. But over time, you just kind of feel like there's this kind of difficulty that's being developed. There's this space that's being developed between the two of us. I was like, where did it come from? It wasn't anything I can think of one big event that caused this. And that's why it's so insidious and so easy to get yourself in a situation where you're become disconnected from your partner. And then all of a sudden, you don't know how to fix things.
It's so easy. You don't even have to try.
You don't even
That's the ironic thing. It's like, it is so easy to get disconnected emotionally from each other. And what essentially happens is that when we get emotionally disconnected from each other, the things, it's like, if there are more negative deposits than there are positive deposits, because what your mind starts to do in the absence of emotional connectivity, in the absence of like really positive, genuine connection, what your mind starts to do in the absence of that is it starts to create narratives, very negative narratives about your partner. Right? And so when that happens and you start to create negative narratives, and this is typically how it goes, it might go something like, he doesn't care about me. I'm not important to him. I'm at the bottom of his list. His work is more important because he's married to his job, or golfing is more important, or hanging out with his buddies is more important, or listening to his mom and talking to his mom is more important than me. Those are usually the narratives that we create in the absence of connection, because when there is emotional connection, it is very hard for that story to coexist with, I know I feel loved. I feel like I am your number one. I feel that, and I know that you put me first, that you put our relationship first. I can feel it and I believe it. It is very hard for a false narrative to enter into a space like that. And so what I find in a lot of my sessions with couples is that we have to spend a lot of time rewriting the narrative, because the narrative has gotten to a place where it sends this message that I am not important to you, you do not love me. And that is a very hurtful and painful and sad narrative. If you end up in an argument with your spouse and that's what you're walking away with, the argument is no longer about whatever it is that you were talking about, whether it was dishes, whether it was about finances, whether it was about the kids. The argument is now really about, do you love me?
Exactly. And that's one of the big things, is that for a lot of people, they will show up for marriage counseling and say, you know what, if my spouse could just stop doing this list of things, our relationship will be significantly better.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that, as a person who is at the other end of it, is like, what are you talking about? Like, those aren't real issues that are in a relationship. You have the issues. If you would stop doing these things, X, Y, Z, and you have your own separate stories and list of things to be fixed, if you would start doing these things better, then our relationship will be better, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people have very strong narratives that make a lot of sense to them. They have a lot of evidence that, yes, I hear what you're saying, Jared and Cara, but in my situation,
it's different,
it's different. My story is real. Like, this is really happening, because your emotional reality is so ingrained. And that's how all of us are. We all have our emotional realities about what's going on around us in our relationship that makes sense to us, because our brains make it make sense.
Yeah. So let me give you a practical example of how this might play out. So we have a medical marriage by nature of Jared being a doctor, right? And so medical marriages are like one of the categories of marriages where there's typically like a lot of extra stress placed on your relationship. This can be true if you're in the medical profession. This can be true if you are maybe like a lawyer where you're working like 80 to 100 hours a week. If you are in the military where your time is like, it doesn't belong to you. This can be true for like any profession that is very demanding when it comes to your job and the time and intensity that it demands from you, right? So typically, and I don't think the statistics fare well for medical marriages in general, especially for like surgeons and the specialties that really have like
a lot of time,
a lot of
where you're spending a
lot of crazy schedules, exactly. So, but I'll just be general for the sake of this illustration, is that like we're in a medical marriage, and I remember when Jared was in medical school, because we got married in your third year. Of medical school. And so dating and getting married, was during like some of the most difficult schedule wise and stress wise for Jared, especially. It was very challenging. And I think that it is very easy. What happens is, so you have medical school, which is typically 4 years. In his case, it was 5 because he did an extra year for psychology. And then you add residency to it, and then you add fellowship to it. So that was another 5 years. So this is now 10 years in total of basically your life doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the system, right? And depending on the type of job that you choose, after residency, when you become an attending, it can even be an extension of like what you experience in residency, right? But the point being is that during medical school and residency, the schedule is very demanding, right? You had call, you had times when you worked like 30 hours straight, and so there are those literally like how can you function as a human being? Like just in general, when you have to work those types of crazy shifts. And then on top of it, you add now having a child into the mix. And then you add, so now the spouse now has to be on this. This is like a preacher's wife. You have to be understanding. You have to be like, I understand that this is their schedule and the schedule is demanding. And so it's almost like you are waiting. There is this like waiting period of like waiting for things to get better, waiting for the schedule to get better, hoping that one day, we will be able to, have control of our own time where it doesn't belong to the hospital, right? Or the medical school. So what typically ends up happening though, is that because like medical school and residency is a grind, like a true grind. Like it is like burn you out, tear you up, mash you up, throw you away grind, right? Like you are just grinding, grinding, grinding. Your time isn't yours. So imagine coming home exhausted. Imagine coming home stressed out. Imagine being sleep deprived, but having to perform at your best when you're showing up at the hospital, right? And then coming home to like hear about you didn't wash the dishes, you left dishes in the sink, or those types of things. It's very easy on Jared's side to create a narrative of like, wow, my wife does not appreciate the work that I'm doing, the hard work that I am putting in, these hours and hours and hours. You feel like doing this for myself? I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing this for me, right? Like that is very easy to like get to that mindset of like, especially for a man, where if you've grown up in a culture where providing is quintessential to your manhood,
definition of being a good man.
It is deed, and especially for us in the, we grew up in the Caribbean, and it's the same for culturally speaking for a lot of African Americans and anybody from the Black diaspora. I think like you grew up in a culture where like providing is how you prove your worth, so to speak, as a man.
And also how you prove your love, right?
And your love.
That's a big part, because I think a lot of men, it's like, okay, well, I'm doing all of this stuff for you, for our family, and it seems like I'm not being appreciated. I feel like what I'm doing is actually being held against me. So, I'm trying to be this good person. I'm doing what I've been told is a good thing to do as a good husband and a good father. And you're telling me what I'm doing is actually not good, and you're telling me that you're not happy. So it's very easy then for the man to be like, well, then this doesn't make any sense. Like you just can't be pleased.
So the narrative, the negative narrative that he can assume is that I don't appreciate him. My wife doesn't appreciate me. She doesn't love me or value me or see how I am contributing, right? She's taking me for granted. I think like this is like the biggest line I hear men say a lot, is that I am taken for granted and I am not respected, right? And so the next piece of that puzzle then becomes, but wait a minute, why did you sign up for that extra shift? Or why did you take that extra call? Or why did you not block your schedule for our anniversary? Or why did you not do those things? And so when that happens, then I could create a narrative that says, see, I'm not important to you.
Work is more important.
I don't matter to you. It's and those are the little ways that life, because those are just regular, when you think about those logistics, of medical school residency, being a doctor, being in a medical profession, those are logistics. Like there's a certain aspect of control that you do have, but then it's like if you're a nurse and you're working a 12-hour shift, like hello, like it's a 12-hour shift, right? Like, and so there's just a lot of logistics that come into play when we do have demanding careers. But at the end of the day, we are both people with emotional needs. And when those emotional needs are not recognized, and when those emotional needs are not fulfilled, then we end up in a situation where those negative narratives start to feel like it's true.
Right.
And that's how we take a happy, functional, great couple who are newlyweds and they're doe-eyed and they're so in love and they're like, I love you and you love me and we're going to make magic together. That's how we take that couple and then they become something completely different.
And one of the things I would say, like kind of drilling in a little bit more detail about kind of why medical marriages can be difficult is, as a doctor, depending on what specialty, you're always maybe pretty good or maybe awful, right? Like it's depending, right? And so in my profession, for example, as a psychiatrist, my hours aren't that bad. They're pretty good. But even there, because of the nature of medicine, especially medicine practice in America, is an incredibly stressful job, right? I think any doctor would say, especially now post-COVID, life is more difficult. So you have patient care, which takes a lot of emotional energy out of any doctor, but especially as a psychiatrist, it takes a lot of energy out of you. You have the bureaucracy of medicine, which can be it can slam you over the head every day, and you can be very frustrated with various kinds of things. You have to deal with that day after day after day, and it can really wear on you. And then obviously, if you're in a profession where you have a lot of time constraints, where like you're working 60, 70 hours, you're in the OR hours upon hours every single day, No, what ends up happening is that by the time you come home, you kind of feel used up.
Yeah.
Emotionally, you feel used up. And so you're less flexible in your thinking. You're more irritable, right? You may need more downtime just to kind of get your senses about you, right?
Lack of patience.
Lack of patience. And within that system, it's very easy then now for you to start developing negative thought patterns that are very inflexible. Negative stories that are very inflexible. It's like, look how hard I'm working. Why are you making a big deal about
dishes in the sink?
Dishes in the sink.
Or clothes on the floor.
Garbage I didn't take out. Like, I mean, what are you talking about?
Right.
You know, like, you know.
Why is that an issue?
Exactly. You know, kind of day I had today at work. And so that's the issue that a lot of people have, is that is just what medical professional life looks like. That's what it looks like regularly. This is not anything unusual. So if you don't really have a good plan, you're going to start developing problems. So the expectation should be, and this is what I would say, the expectation should be, if you're in a medical marriage and you're starting off, the expectation should be you're going to have significant difficulties. That should be the expectation. Don't be caught like unawares, like, I didn't see this coming. It's like, no, this is going to come. The only question is like, what are you going to do to kind of safeguard your relationship? Because these stressors are real. And the medical system isn't changing anytime soon, right? And it's great to be able to help people, but there is significant issues that you have to deal with on a daily basis that you cannot simply avoid.
And this applies to any couple. Like I mentioned in the beginning, like a lot of couples, professional couples who have really stressful jobs and really demanding careers and that are time intensive. This applies to you if you're traveling constantly, if you're constantly like, you know, always on the go, you're constantly in meetings, you're working past 5, you're taking calls at 11 o'clock at night because you have to get with somebody in a different time zone. This applies to you as well, right? The point being is that this could be anybody. And anybody can go from, I love you, you're the best thing that ever happened to me, to, oh my gosh, like, I don't even think I'm important to you or that I matter to you because you keep prioritizing these other things. And so imagine coming home from a stressful day and imagine feeling like, wow, like I'm so exhausted. And then you're met with criticism. You're not met with appreciation. You're not met with thank you. You really appreciate how hard you're working for our family. What you're greeted with is, why didn't you take out the trash? Or how could you do that again? And what that is, what most people in that situation don't realize, both the person who is saying it and the person who is being directed to, is that underneath that criticism, underneath that, why didn't you do this? Like that look, that glare, that tone, underneath that is a cry, is a literal cry and a plea for, you don't see me and I'm feeling so unloved and I'm feeling rejected. That is what that is. That's like code all over the place, code word for, you know, I feel that's the disconnect. That's the disconnection, guys, right? Like, it's like, instead of me coming and saying like, babe, I really feel disconnected from you and I really feel like, you know, that we're so busy and we haven't had a chance to connect lately and that makes me sad.
Or I miss you.
Or I miss you and I want us to be able to connect. Instead of saying that, what we say instead is criticism. Or what, and that's a typical pursuer move if you're a pursuer and if you've listened to our episode on pursuer and withdrawal cycles. And that's a typical pursuer move, to be greeted with someone with criticism.
And if you're a withdrawer, which we've also talked about, you know, you may come home as somebody's in a medical marriage, you come home from hard day at work, and if your spouse is a withdrawer, you may get a cold shoulder. You may not feel like they're engaging you. You may not feel like the person is really being positive towards you. It's almost like the house is cold. The house is very cold, right? And it's like, what happened? Like, you used to be this fun person, like I love hanging out with, and you know, I would love hanging out with you because it would help me to de-stress because you know you were just this fun person. And now all of a sudden you're cold shouldering me. We're not having sex. We barely talk. You know what's going on? Well, because that person is a withdrawer in that situation, they just know that, hey, if they even try to engage at all, it's going to create an issue. And so they'd be like, you know what? I just feel so alone. And you need to do something because I don't feel like you care about me, right? And so it may look different depending on what kind of personality you have and if you're a withdrawer or pursuer. But what ends up happening is that at the end of the day, both people are missing each other.
Yeah.
Both people want to connect in a healthy way with each other. The problem is they just don't know how.
Yeah.
Because all of these things seem to just create these barriers for connection.
And one quick thing I would say to that is, just as much as a pursuer's criticism, underneath the criticism is basically a cry for, see my hurt, see my pain, see how I'm feeling rejected and alone and abandoned. The same is true for then how the withdrawer might respond to the criticism. So the withdrawer might respond to the criticism by either getting defensive, getting angry, to shut it down, by withdrawing, by stonewalling, by being silent. And those things that the withdrawer is doing is also symbolic of their pain that they are experiencing. But 9 out of 10 times, we don't realize the amount of pain that we're fully in, because those, what I call protector moves, kind of shoot up and take over. And so when they take over, I'm no longer functioning or you know, in a space of like feeling the pain. I'm using that protective move, like that criticism, to basically block my own pain. And you're using your shutting down, withdrawing, stonewalling, or being silent to also protect your pain. And a lot of times we are not fully aware of the depth of pain that we're in. But the bigger the protector, the bigger the pain. It is very corresponding. And so you will easily look at your husband and think like, oh my gosh, like he definitely didn't care, right? Like I already thought I was not important because he's working so many hours. And then he comes home and I tell him about the dishes, and then he like walks away. He really doesn't care. So then the cycle literally starts to prove your theory, your negative narrative. It starts to prove it as accurate. Fact. It is now a fact because I have evidence. And the evidence is that you walked away. You shut down. And then we start to say, you see this? He's a narcissist, he's gaslighting, and he needs to work on his own issues. And that's what we start to say.
All these kind of pop psychology terms kind of
I always tell my clients, I'm like, listen, if you married a narcissist, that actually says a lot about you. You know, in terms of like what's going on, because people marry at their emotional health.
And you know, the other thing is like the counter to that, right? So like, let's say I'm the husband who's the withdrawer and I come home. And then the first thing I hear through the door is like, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you go to the bank or whatever it is? Why didn't you? Then I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't have the time or the energy for your drama today, right?
He don't care.
And so I may then say to myself,
I am right. He doesn't.
Right. So I'll say to myself, okay, why is she being like this? Like she's making our relationship more difficult to be in. So I'm disappearing. So I ain't go down to the basement and now I'm on my Xbox until 12 o'clock at night. Because I'm not even trying to, I'm trying to, one, de-stress, and then two, I'm not trying to engage with all of this stuff because it's just going to make things worse. Because what if I answer back? What if I did say, you know what? You know, you're just acting ungrateful or whatever it is that may come to my mind to say in that moment. Then
it'll just make things worse for sure.
Exactly, because it's World War III. And you say, I don't want to engage somebody who, when I engage them, it makes things worse. So I feel stuck. So I'm just going to just go over to this corner over here and just stay calm and not make things worse. And then so in my own way, I'm trying to make the relationship better. And I'm developing this narrative day after day that my wife is just cantankerous or my wife is somebody who just can't be pleased. And no matter what I do, I'm failing.
Yeah. And I think the conclusion here, guys, is to just be aware. Is to be aware that disconnection, emotional disconnection, which then leads to other problems in a relationship. It can lead to having affairs. It can lead to, you know, going down a rabbit hole of addictions. It can lead to other things creeping into your relationship that would make the disconnection even worse. But emotional disconnection doesn't start or doesn't happen because something bad happened to you. It doesn't happen because you have an affair. Chances are the affair happened because you were emotionally disconnected, right? And so when we argue over our parenting style or we argue over finances, a lot of times we're arguing because we are not connected to each other. Because the truth is that if I felt fully loved and fully seen and fully valued as a human being and as a partner and as a spouse, to in my relationship, then it naturally gives way to be amenable when talking about things. So talking about finances becomes a discussion instead of a debate or an argument. Talking about the kids, it's like, okay, I want to understand what you're saying. You want to understand what I'm saying. There's just a different posture when we bring these difficult topics that essentially nearly all couples are able to work it out. Nearly all couples are able to work out those difficult situations when they are emotionally connected.
So you're on the same team. You feel like you're on the same team as opposed to being on opposite teams.
Yeah.
And when you're on the same team, then all problems that you have are problems to be faced as a team. And so it's not about what's going on between the two of us. It's about, okay, what do we practically do about these things that are coming at us? And you feel like, okay, we can manage this together because we're a team. You know, an emotional connection provides so many solutions to problems in marriage. Like there are a number of problems that people have that if they were just emotionally connected to each other, they could actually solve those problems, or at least come to some kind of an agreement to manage this chronic problem in a way that doesn't cause problems for the relationship. So emotional connection is, when you don't have it, it's the source of your problems. And when you do have it, it's a solution to your problem. So it's not something that you want to neglect. It's something you definitely want to make sure that you're paying adequate attention to.
Yeah, and just some quick tips in terms of like how to maintain an emotional connection. I think, you know, one of the things that you have to be able to do is to learn and grow in emotional intelligence. And so when I say that, I mean, you as an individual, so I'm speaking to both people in the relationship, but you as an individual, you have to grow into your own internal awareness of your emotions, of your traumas, of your triggers, and of your stories. Because if you are not even aware that you are creating a false narrative, you then don't have the words to say, for example, you know, I was triggered when you came home late. And the story that I told myself was that I don't matter to you. And that caused me to feel sad. And that's way less blaming and way less blamey than, so why you come home so late? You didn't think to call or say or have and so see the difference in like posture when you're able to just have that your own internal awareness. And the same can be said for then the husband in that example, which is, will my wife's disappointment, hurt, pain, tears trigger me into my shame cycle of inadequacy, of not feeling good enough, of not feeling like I'm a good enough man? Because it also takes you to be emotionally aware to catch that, to be like, okay, I see your disappointment coming and it's I'm trying to back away from it versus leaning into it, right? And so that requires two emotionally mature people in order to be able to do that. And a lot of couples and a lot of people in general, it is very hard to achieve that without therapy, without the help of a therapist, without you doing your own work individually, and better yet, as a couple. Right.
And the interesting thing is that most people consider themselves to be emotionally immature. Like most people consider, like there are very people who are like,
I'm emotionally immature, right?
No, most people consider themselves to be emotionally immature. And you may be mature in terms of like, hey, you can keep your life going, you can pay your bills, all these different things, and solve problems at work. But when we're talking about emotional maturity, we're talking about being able to take on those relationship issues in a healthy way and dealing with your own issues in a healthy way, because we all have issues. And if you think you don't have issues, you are deluding yourself.
Well, if you think you don't have issues, that is also a sign of emotional immaturity.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
That is the point.
I think like when we can walk away from the table and own our triggers, own our, you know, our own stuff that we bring to the table, own our baggage, own our, you know, own sense of inadequacy, when we could do that, that is what makes you emotionally mature. That is what makes you, you know, a better person all around, because it's like you're taking ownership. Being emotionally mature and intelligent does not mean that you don't have triggers, you don't have trauma, you don't have things that impact you. It's that you have like a certain level of awareness with what does impact you, with your own trauma. You take responsibility for it, so you don't palm it off on somebody else, as in like, well, it's your fault because you trigger me.
Well, that's the thing. And a lot of times people say, yeah, well, I know my stuff. I know how this stuff going on. What was going on at home when I grew up, or certain previous relationship traumas. I know I have these things. But, and then we come up with something that our spouse is doing as to why the relationship isn't working. Yeah. Right? And whenever you use that but, it tells me that you're not really, really understanding what's going on for you. Because when you start understanding what's going on for you, your first posture is to say, okay, what is going on inside of me that's triggering me, that's causing me to act this way, that's causing me to feel this way? What am I actually feeling? What is actually going on deep inside of me? Am I able to talk about that to my spouse?
Yeah.
When you get to that place now, then you're really starting to get emotionally mature. Yeah. And when both people are able to do that, then you are able to actually start to feel really connected. Because sharing our deep things, our deep emotion, our deep pain connects us, right? Yeah. That's how God made us. Talking about those things connects us. And then now because we're so bonded, we feel so much more secure in our relationship. So when things do come up, it doesn't make us feel like our relationship is failing or that things are just going absolutely wrong. It's just like, well, this just happened. And we can deal with it together because I know you're a good person. I trust you. I love you. I know you love me. I know you care about me. And because of that, we can deal with any kind of issue that comes up feeling much more confident and much more secure in each other.
Yeah. And so, some of the things to think about as a couple is that investing in your relationship should be like an ongoing thing, right? So doing things to stay connected, going on date nights, having scheduled times where you actually do talk, where you talk in uninterrupted. We're not going to talk about bills. We're not going to talk about the kids. We're not going to talk about the leaky faucet. We're just going to talk about us. We're going to talk about, where is your heart today? How is it feeling? Is there, something weighing on you? Is there something that I can do to serve you? Like, those are the types of conversations that you need to start having on a regular basis.
And those conversations don't have to last hours. Actually, it probably shouldn't last hours on a regular basis to make it regular. Because if something's going to be happening for hours and hours, and you're not going to do it, it's just impractical. But if you can spend 15, 20 minutes a day just doing just that, you are putting drops of water in that bucket that you're going to need when things start to get really rough. It's like, well, the bucket is full and I can actually get some water now because I have filled the bucket. For a lot of people, when crisis comes, that's when they're like, okay, we need to try to figure out a way to fix our relationship. It's like, well, what kind of deposits have you made into your relationship to kind of actually help you to withstand the inevitable crises that life throws us at and the devil throws at us, right? Those things are coming. They are coming. The only question is, how prepared are you? Have you been putting in the work? Have you been spending time together? And when I use the word work, it's not so much like, oh man, this is such hard stuff. It's like, no, these things are actually really not that hard. It's just about consistency. And when you consistently do that, you actually feel better. You have these rhythms of your relationship that keeps the relationship maintained and healthy.
Yeah. And so I just want to encourage you guys to just pour into your relationship, invest in your relationship. Do not wait until you're on death's door to seek couples therapy or to seek help, but do it in spite of anything bad happening, right? Do it as a way to just arm yourself up, to strengthen yourself. Same thing for therapy, same thing for individual therapy. Don't wait until you're
things
in crisis,
are falling apart.
Do individual therapy when things are good, so that you're strengthening your own inner core. That I think of therapy as just an act of self-care. For myself, even as a therapist, I see a therapist and I see that as just a form of self-care and a form of a way to be taken care of, a way for somebody else to look out for me, and a way for me to just pour into myself in a positive way. And so if you have any questions about therapy, feel free to shoot me a DM. I would be happy to answer them for you. And we do have a coaching group coming up in the new year for couples. And this coaching group is going to really highlight and really work on growing and increasing in emotional connectivity while simultaneously repairing any relationship injuries or past traumas that you may have experienced. So it's going to be a twofold component of working on trauma while at the same time working to grow closer together as a couple, learning how to really hear each other with our hearts and understand each other's hearts. And that's coming up in the new year. So if y'all are interested in that, shoot me a DM and I'll be happy to give you more information.
All right, guys. It's been really, really good talking with y'all.
Yes.
Hope that the things that we said were helpful. So definitely reach out if you feel like you need some assistance. You just want to have a question answered. We can definitely get those questions from you and address it in another live, because we want to make sure as the AM community that we are helping you, that we're helping the people who are here. Because at the end of the day, life can be tough, but when we do it together as a group, we're able to actually deal with things much more effectively. So we're just really glad you guys spent this time with us today. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.